Welcome. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the hormones that are involved in fat distribution and fat deposition in the body. We're going to be looking at the concept of the hormone belly, cortisol belly, menopause, whatever you like to call it. And I'll be explaining the key hormone players here. Of course, we're going to look at the sorts of things that cause cortisol belly. And in another video, I will cover some remedies and treatment strategies for that. So let's begin. Also, just letting you know that I'm going to be bringing in some research today. And I think this is a really good thing to do, actually, just so that you can learn about things like hormone pathways and the role that that plays in the development of a hormone imbalance. So I'm excited. Let's start looking at cortisol belly. So first up, a lot of you would have heard about the hormones estrogen and progesterone. And in my line of work, as a women's hormone naturopath, talking about this all day long, 5 days a week almost, because I learned very early on in perimenopause that a 5-day week wasn't quite the thing that was going to contribute to better health for me. So I have more given myself an extra day to relax and do things like this that I enjoy doing. I enjoy giving back to community in this way. But because we tend to fixate on the hormones estrogen and progesterone, we tend to think that that's all that hormones do, that the hormones are just about fertility, hormones are just about baby creation, or perhaps they're just about menopause, because we've just started to have a little bit of tunnel vision around this concept of what a hormone does. But the reality is that hormones like estrogen have actually been found to react with almost all receptors in our body and in so many different bodily processes beyond fertility. So let's have a quick look at a study here. This is a paper that was published in Nature. I'm going to share this with you now so we can have a quick look at this. So this paper was published in Nature Journal, and it gives you a really good overview of the many different facets of how estrogen is influencing your daily metabolic processes. But not only that, also things like where it has a protective effect in the brain. So what you see up the top here with brain, estrogen's neuroprotective, inhibiting inflammation of the nerve cells, glial cells, controlling pain sensitivity, having a role in memory. Okay, so as soon as you start to see the transitions that occur in perimenopause and menopause, you start to see that there is a reduction in cognition, or at least cognition becomes more challenging. Memory, including the ability to focus and concentrate. And by no doubt, if we continue to see the levels of dysregulation of estrogen in our environment and in our internal environment, in our bodies, then we're going to see more heightened examples of this, such as the impact on cognition when we move into perimenopause and menopause. Okay, next up we see an impact of estrogen in the breast, where estrogen has a stimulatory effect, stimulates the proliferation of the breast epithelium. But we already know that at puberty, for girls, when estrogen starts to kick in, we see the development of breast tissues, of tissues in the hips, the development of the hourglass figure. We really have estrogen to attribute that to. So there's most certainly this activity of estrogen binding to receptors in breast cells and having an effect there, estrogen having an effect in the brain. Now here's the effect of estrogen in what we call the fatty tissues, so adipose tissues. Concentration of estrogens, according to this paper, influences adipogenesis. What on earth does that mean? Break the word down. So adipo refers to the fatty substances. Genesis is the creation of. So estrogen is going to influence the rate and amount of fat, fat cell creation in the body. It's also going to have a role in the metabolism of fatty tissues. Estrogens produced include estradiol and estrone. Okay, so we have the actual production of 2 types of estrogen, E1, which is estrone, E2, which is estradiol. Estradiol is the most, I believe, the most important and has the most significant action on our physiology of all of the different types of hormones, of estrogen hormones. Estrone is the one that really is a little bit more a hormone that you see in, sort of like menopause. So once you get to different types of estrogens being produced. You see more estrone, and we see these types of estrogen being produced in fatty tissues. This means that issues with estrogens may play a role in the development of more fatty tissue creation, but the more fatty tissue you have, the more likely you are to again produce those estrogens. So you see this vicious cycle emerging, and we talk about vicious cycles even more as I go through, talking about cortisol and other hormones, including insulin. So estrogen also has a protective effect in the heart. It has an effect on the vasodilation of your vessels, your cardiovascular vessels, inhibits the response of blood vessels to injuries. So we would think that estrogen would definitely have not only a reproductive role, but also a role in even just the regulations, ability of your blood to circulate, the health of your vessels, and also, if you come down here, the health of your bones in terms of regulating bone turnover and bone growth. And many of us know that as we move into perimenopause and menopause, there we start to get issues with bone density. And at those stages of our lives, we have fluctuating levels of estrogens in perimenopause, leading to a vastly reduced drop or vastly reduced level of estrogen in menopause. So we also have, of course, the impact on the ovaries, and this is where we have this link between estrogens and fertility and reproduction. So most of the estrogens will be produced in the ovaries. They will then move from the ovaries upon being released into the bloodstream, affecting different tissues and organs. And this is where they start to now bind to fat tissues, breast tissues, brain, heart tissues, vessels. And we get estradiol and estrone being produced in the ovaries again. And down the bottom, you'll see that there is an impact on skeletal muscle. Please note this: estrogens produce skeletal muscle damage and inflammation. Your estrogen is really your best friend when it comes to recovering from, depleting or exhausting exercise, strenuous exercise and activity. Now, this is also why the best time to do that strenuous physical activity is in the first half of the menstrual cycle if you're a woman, because your estrogens will be higher, naturally higher at that point, and they will surge around ovulation. But in the second half of the cycle, you'll have a lowered ability to recover from exertional physical activity. And in fact, you may actually end up just upping your stress hormones because you are over exercising and stressing your body out, and you don't have estrogen at that point to counteract that stress. So as you can see, estrogen has a lot of effects throughout different parts of the body, and so does progesterone. So estrogen and progesterone are both going to play significant roles in lots of different aspects of your bodily health. They also might play a role in your metabolism and the gain of fat around the belly area. So that's not actually the hormone that I want to talk about today. Estrogen, progesterone, they're not the hormones. But we are going to be looking at another hormone, which is equally important, that plays a role in our stress management and also plays a role in the body composition. So I'm going to be showing you next a diagram of different types of hormones that your body produces, and you'll recognize estrogen and progesterone in here, but I also want to show you the importance of where we get our cortisol from. So this paper just looked at the production of hormones, but I'm not so much focusing on the rest of the paper, just this little bit here. So you notice that the hormone processing or hormone manufacture begins with cholesterol. So this is why cholesterol is so important for your hormonal health. And if you have a diet which is too low in healthy fatty acids, you won't get the cholesterols that you need to build your hormones. For example, if you are very underweight and for women, you can actually experience a condition called FHA, functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, where you don't get any menstrual bleeds. These conditions can actually be tied to stress and underweight. Now, with cholesterol, if you're underweight and you're not eating enough good food or enough fatty acids, then your body becomes depleted in cholesterols, and it becomes unable to then go on to produce pregnenolone. Now, pregnenolone leads to the production of progesterone. The progesterone that we often measure, however, is this one here, the 17-hydroxyprogesterone. So we tend to read that one because of its physiological effects in the body. So notice that in order to get progesterone, you need cholesterol. Now, another way of looking at this is if you run into issues with the production of pretty much any hormone, then your body will start to increase cholesterol production. This can lead to situations where you come back from a blood test disillusioned because you thought you were doing everything right, but your cholesterol levels have increased. So that's a topic for a different video. Let me know, by the way, if there's anything you want me to talk about. Happy to do that. And I will take notes, of course. I always look at my comments on YouTube. I'm very thankful for all of my viewers, all of my audience. So if you are running, for example, into deficiency in progesterone, this will lead to a ramping up of cholesterol. And the cholesterol you might think is from food, but actually there is a hormonal aspect to it. Now notice that from the 17-hydroxyprogesterone, we get 11-deoxycortisol, leading to the production of cortisol. Cortisol is the activated version, so we've got cortisone, for example, but cortisol is the one we often look at because it's so active and it's so significant and potent in its actions on the body. So here's another lesson for you. Issues with cortisol will directly implicate progesterone, which, if you have issues with that, will directly affect cholesterol production. Now, take a woman who is in perimenopause or even early menopause when things haven't really settled down yet hormonally, and she's going through stress. What will happen is that the stress will trigger the increased production of cortisol. This will lead to depletion of progesterone because so much progesterone is being used to produce the cortisol to help her manage stress. This doesn't just happen in perimenopause, but I'm just giving you this example because we know that levels of stress, mood changes, mild to moderate depression, they all increase in perimenopause. So you can develop these problems with cholesterol levels and progesterone levels just because you're really stressed out. Now, if we go down from 17-hydroxyprogesterone in the middle, we get the production of androstenediones, something that you might end up getting tested on a blood test. If you have a condition known as polycystic ovarian syndrome, they'll be looking at something called your FAI, your free androgen index, and they'll be looking at hormones like this. They'll also be looking at testosterone. And notice that from those hormones, you get the production of estradiol, your most active version of estrogen if you are a cycling woman, menstrual cycling woman, or the production of estrone if, again, you are a woman, but not necessarily in the fertile years, because estrone becomes more elevated after the fertile years. Okay, so we have all these different hormones being produced, but we now know that we start with cholesterol. Cholesterol leads to progesterone production. Without cholesterol, we wouldn't have any estrogen, we wouldn't have any cortisol. And so when we get imbalances in those, we always go back to expecting some sort of abnormality with cholesterol. Okay, so don't beat yourself up. It could be stress. It could be issues with estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. Doesn't always mean that you have been eating really poorly. Of course, you need a healthy diet to have healthy hormones. That goes without saying, but we too often jump to blaming people and making people feel like they're not looking after themselves because they have high cholesterol. So there's just one more hormone that I want to point out here, which is DHEA. DHEA is a very important adrenal hormone, and it is another hormone that can implicate the deposition of fatty tissues and things like that. So I'm going to jump back now out of this slide, but if by the way you want copies of any of these papers, you probably have the name there already, but just pop a message into the comments and I can put a link in there for you.